Okay, here's the icebreaker question to get you started today. What do you think is God's ideal picture or ideal for your life? What do you think is God's ideal picture, God's ideal perfect picture for your life? Talk about that with your group, and we'll dive into the Bible study in a little bit. So I'm sitting in my computer right now and working on some things. Part of it is preparing for these discussion questions, but what I'm working on right now, what you see in the background is the children's ministry area for elementary students here at LifeBridge, and so I'm working on setting up a computer that's an old laptop computer that was not working. Pieces of it were not working, and so I have fixed it so that hopefully we can get it up and running, and it'll be a permanent computer for the children's ministry, so I can run PowerPoint slides and play video clips and sound effects and so forth for the teaching and the ministry that they do down here. And so I'm working on that. Part of doing that was knowing that while the computer didn't work, I know how the computer is designed to work. And so I would go to like the manufacturer's website and so forth to look up things and to run diagnostics and figure out which pieces were not working according to the design. And then I can troubleshoot and figure out if it can be fixed, economically or not. And it just got me thinking about what it is that we're talking about today. See, we're looking at the entire Bible again. We're going to walk through it very quickly. In 6 to 7 weeks here, we're going to be just looking at some overview concepts in Scripture. And the first set of concepts that we're going to look at are from the very beginning, first book of the Bible, Genesis, where we can pick up some concepts that can be applied to every book of the Bible. And that will help us to understand what is going on in Scripture when we read Scripture, not just in the 6 weeks that we're going through now, but as we move forward. And so the first thing I pointed out on Sunday is that God is the one who created the heavens and the earth. God had a design in mind when God put everything together. So the earth is the right distance from the sun so it doesn't burn up, and it doesn't freeze. The earth is tilted on an axis so that between the rotation and the orbit around the sun, the maximum amount of the earth is habitable. And so most of the earth people can live on. The water cycle, the air cycle, carbon dioxide, oxygen, plants, photosynthesis, animals, and breathing, all of that works together by design so that what we have is a world that is self-sustaining, and it works so perfectly that we call it natural or nature. And then God communicates that design to us. It's kind of like me working on the computer. And the computer is designed to work a certain way, and then I need to go to the manufacturer's website or a manual to find out how it's designed to work if I want to fix something that's broken or help it to get working again. And so the question is, for you to talk about at your tables after you read these scriptures, is simply this: how did God communicate God's design for our lives? World, life, universe, everything. How did God communicate that design to people in the past? And how does God communicate that design to us today? So read those passages from the beginning of the Bible, talk about those questions, and you can press play when you're ready to continue. So the computer that I'm using is, like I said, an older computer. I'll see if I can give you a picture of it here. But it doesn't look all that great now. All you have left is a keyboard and now a bunch of things that are plugged into it. I guess you can see that. Anyway, but the computer actually was an excellent computer. It's a laptop that I had for a large portion of my time here at LifeBridge in ministry, and I wrote a lot of lessons on this laptop. I did a lot of video creation, editing, compiling, and so forth on this laptop. I did a lot of computer programming. LifeBridgeAlive.com is I did a lot of programming on this laptop. And so at the heart, it is a really good, powerful machine. The processor, the RAM, the memory, all of that is capable of doing an awful lot. The hard drive was getting old and was starting to die, and the screen a couple of times went out on me, and so I had it in the pile of computer graveyard stuff. I was going to take it to the electronics recycling place, but for whatever reason, I decided to hold on to it. I couldn't just throw it away because I knew that those base components were really good, and so if I ever had a reason to use just those base components, that I could have a really good computer. And so when I was talking with Tracy about children's ministry and kind of the vision there and the next steps for the children's ministry, part of it is setting things up so that they can do PowerPoint slides, play videos, do video, create videos and do some video editing and so forth. And immediately I'm thinking about this laptop, but the screen was dead. And so what I did was I replaced the hard drive because, like I said, that was kind of dying, and I replaced it with one that is a newer technology, faster hard drive. So it made the machine even better than when I was using it. And so the heart of the machine is really good. Then what I did is I removed the external screen because there are plugs. I don't know if you can see this or not, but there are plugs on the side of this where you can plug in an external monitor, and what they want to be able to do is use it on a projector like up there, and so that could be their PC screen, that can be their monitor. Knowing those things, I was able to take this machine and remove the screen, use the external monitor, the projector is an external monitor, hook things up so it would play sound through their sound system and so forth. And they got a really nice PC, and we didn't have to spend a lot of money. Ministry, finances, we're trying to be good stewards of what it is that God gives us. And we got them a nice computer that they can use for putting those videos and those slides and doing all of that ministry sound effects and so forth. Now, why am I sharing all that? If you know the design, if you know how something is supposed to work, a couple things happen. You end up very empowered because, first of all, you know when something is healthy and when it is not healthy. So when it's working the way it's supposed to and when it's not working the way it's supposed to. And so with this computer, that was the case. I knew which parts were working, which parts were not working, because I know how it's designed and what it's supposed to do when it works. The second thing then is that you have choices that you can make. And that's what we just talked about. It was design and choices with the last question that you had. But when we make choices, those choices will yield consequences. Oftentimes we think about consequences in the negative sense. We think of a consequence as being a bad thing when I do something bad. But a consequence is also a good thing when I do something good. So in the case of God and Adam and Eve, for example, God said, look, every tree with fruit, every seed-bearing plant, I give to you as food. Well, what is God telling them? God's telling them your body is designed in such a way that you need food to eat, because when you eat food, that gives your body energy and that keeps you alive. The consequence of eating the food that God said that they could eat is that you get to live. But the consequence of eating the fruit from a specific tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, had a negative consequence. If you eat that, you will surely die. Now, it wasn't that the tree was poisoned so that they would die instantly. What the tree was a test. Do you want to trust God? Do you want to be with God or not? If you don't want to be with God, then God will give you what you ask for. And so he removed Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. There were consequences to each of them because of the choices that they made and the way that they made those choices. Even the serpent, who we now know from the book of Revelation that we finished up last week, that serpent who turned against God and then tempted Adam and Eve and tricked them, by lying to them, that serpent is also going to have negative consequences. And so, throughout Scripture, when we read the Bible, what we find is that God communicates design and tells us the consequences. The positive ones, you can eat any of these and the fruit from any of these trees or any of these seed-bearing plants, and you will get to live because that gives you food to eat, and your body needs that. Or if you eat this one over here, you will surely die. And I'm telling you that this is the way it works. And so if you will trust me, avoid the one that makes you die and do the one that makes you live. In all of it, what we see is that God's desire for us, God's design for us, is that we live. God doesn't want us to die. So take a minute to read the passage that's focused on Adam and Eve there and the choices that they make. And just go through that passage. What are the positive choices that they are offered? Maybe there's more in Genesis 1 and 2 where God communicates to them that would be positive choices. One that comes to mind has to do with marriage and children and so forth. But you can look at that, the passages there. Also look at Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. What kind of choices were they offered with positive consequences? And then what were they told about that would have negative consequences? And what did they choose? Talk about that at your groups, and press play when you're ready to continue. It is an older computer, that's for sure. And like I said, it was on the pile that was going to be discarded. But there was something about it that I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, because I knew how good of a machine it was. And I knew that just because there was a problem with the screen and a problem with the hard drive, it didn't mean that at the core it had gone bad. And so I wasn't willing to give up on it. When we look at Scripture all the way through the Bible, what we find is that God treats us in much the same way. God is not willing to give up on us. Even when we make bad choices, even when we know and we purposefully go against God, and then there are consequences that are negative consequences to that. God doesn't quit. God doesn't give up on us. God sees us at the core and recognizes that we are made in the image of God. In the image of God, God created them, male and female. He made them. So men and women, all of us are different from the animals. We are set apart from that. We are given dominion over the animals and the plants and the earth by God because we are different. We are made in the image of God. And so when we make choices where things go wrong and there are parts of us that are broken, God doesn't quit. God doesn't discard us or throw us away. God continues to work with us. And sometimes in the Bible stories, as we read about God working with humanity throughout history, we see that God is not going to resolve the problem completely at that time, but God does have a plan for resolving the problem. And God gives us a hint about that by telling us a little bit about how God's going to resolve that problem later on, down the road, maybe hundreds or even thousands of years later. In the case of Adam and Eve, the problem that does not get resolved in that story is the problem of the serpent. The serpent, which we know is Satan, that dragon in the book of Revelation, is left to live. And what that also means is that he is left to tempt and to plant seeds of doubt and to lie. In fact, he gets described as a liar and the father of all lies later on in Scripture. And so the serpent has to crawl on the belly and not be able to, I guess, walk. Maybe it was able to walk before. And the serpent is told that the serpent will lose, but for now there is a tension, there is a battle between the serpent and humanity, the children of Adam and Eve. And so what we see is that there is still a tension in the story, in history, and that tension we know still exists today. We also know, though, from the book of Revelation, that there will be a day where that serpent, that dragon, however you want to describe him, Satan, the devil, will get what he deserves, will be punished, and the punishment will match the crime, what it is that Satan has been doing to all of humanity for thousands of years. In the meantime, we live with the tension. And what God does for Adam and Eve is gives a little hint about what it is that is going to happen. And then we get more details as time goes on over the course of the Bible being written, which it took over 1,000 years for the Bible to be written. And so this first little hint is that there will be enmity between the serpents and human beings. And then it says in the singular that there's going to be one who will, the serpent will bite his heel, but he will crush the serpent's head. And of course, we know that the one that was being talked about was Jesus. But we don't know that at this point in the story. And so God telling us a little bit about how it's going to be resolved in the future, there's a special name for that, and that is prophecy. The prophecy is giving us information that God knows about God's plan and how God is going to resolve the problem. But we don't know and we don't see the plan. It is not available to us yet. So God gives us some information to give us hope, to remind us that God sees it, and that God has a solution for resolving it. Read that last little bit. Talk a little bit about prophecy, not just the one here about the serpent, but are there other prophecies that you know of from Scripture, from the Bible, that God talks about future events. And so talk about that. What is the prophecy, and what is it talking about? What's the problem that needs to be solved, and how is God talking about solving that with the prophecy? And if you want to, you can just talk about the one here with the serpent and leave it at that, and then go to your time of prayer. Pray for one another, that you will all walk together with God, that you will live out more and more God's ideal for your lives. And pray for me also, that I will live out that ideal for my life as well. Know that I'm praying for you, that you are not alone in this, that God has put us together, and I'm grateful for that. And so I am lifting you up, that God will be with you and remind you that He is with you as you live out God's design for your life. God bless.